Hello, my name's Jonathan Dunne, and this is the 10th in a series of videos called Theological English. Now, we saw in the last video how the order of letters in our alphabet comes from or is based on the order of hieroglyphs in Egypt, which were adopted by foreign workers about 4,000 years ago. And instead of using them to represent whole words or syllables, they used them to represent individual sounds. And this alphabet was taken on by the Phoenicians, from where it passed to Greece and Rome, and from Rome through the Roman Empire. Well, I'd like today to look not at the order of letters in the alphabet, but their shape, their appearance. And this again is based on Egyptian hieroglyphs. You may be interested to know that certain letters in our alphabet are actually pictures, drawings. Take, for example, the capital letter A. This, if you look at it upside down, is meant to represent the head of an ox, because that's what the letter meant. It meant ox, aleph, alpha. Similarly, the capital letter M represented water. And curiously, the letter M that we use today is meant to represent the waves of the sea. Another example, more obvious perhaps, is the capital letter O, which not surprisingly represents an open eye. Now, I've talked about the closed and open eye because a closed eye is in fact the ego in English, I. And an open eye is when we breathe life into the ego and turn to God and repent, stroke, realize that there is something else in this life apart from our own selfish needs, and we open the line and exclaim, "Oh." So the shapes of our letters again are related to Egyptian hieroglyphs, but today I'd actually like to look at lowercase letters. Now, lowercase letters were not introduced until much later, the time of the Roman Empire. So we can't go back to Egyptian hieroglyphs to find the meaning for the way that these letters are shaped. But I believe that the way letters are shaped can give us a key to the spiritual meaning of words. And so it's important to see how the letters relate to each other according to their shape, their physical appearance. Now, if we go through the alphabet as it is used in English, we will see that certain letters are similar. This can be found either by turning a letter upside down, or back to front, or simply continuing the letter. So, for example, back to front. Well, if you look at the letter B, if you turn it back to front, you will see that B is very similar to D. So this is an example of how letters can be similar. Now, if we continue, the next letter is C. C is very similar to E. If we just continue the line a little, so C gives E. They're very similar. I've just continued the line here back to where it begins. So we've looked at B, C, D, E. F is an example of a letter that can be turned upside down. If you turn F upside down, you get the letter T. F, T. Okay? Then we've got G. H is another example of a letter that can be continued because H is very similar to N. You simply have to lengthen the line. H and N. You see, they're very similar. We've just lengthened the line. Similarly, I and L. Again, we just lengthen the line, continue the letter. And in fact, a capital I is almost the same as the lowercase letter L. And I think that's for a reason. M, if we turn it upside down, gives W. And in the same way, N, if we turn it upside down, gives U. So these are more examples of letters that can be turned upside down. We could look at the example of P, but that's more of an example if you rotate the letter rather than turning it upside down. You will see that D is the same as P. You just have to turn it around 180 degrees. And then you've got another example of a letter that you continue is V and Y. Very similar, these two letters, V and Y. You simply continue the letter. So we see different ways that letters can be similar if you turn them back to front, B, D. If you continue the letter for a little, if you turn the letter upside down or rotate it by 180 degrees. And another way is to cross it out. And there we see the example of L, which is a straight line, and T, which is a straight line with a line drawn through it. Now, if you make these changes, you can begin to make very interesting word connections. For example, if you cross out the L and get T, you can connect male and mate. So, I'd like to look at some examples of word connections made by changing the letters according to their appearance. These are the examples I would like to look at today. You're welcome to pause the video and have a go yourself to see what you can find. So, the first example I give is breath. Breath. Now, breath, if we turn the B into D, gives thread. Thread. You might be wondering what's the connection between breath and thread. Well, I think there is a very strong connection that pertains to all of us. Breath, if we use the front vowels that I talked about in a previous video, A, E, I, and so take out the A and the E and replace them with I, gives birth. Thread, meanwhile, if we take out the R, gives death. So I would suggest that you see how breath is similar to birth. I've simply changed the vowels. They're all front vowels, A, E, I, pronounced at the front of the mouth, but the other letters are the same. And thread, if I remove the R, gives death. I would suggest that breath is the thread linking birth and death. When we're born, we take a deep breath and then cry out loud. I remember when my son cried out loud and I was standing in the corridor outside and I heard him. He'd taken a breath, and when we die, that breath comes out of our mouth. So breath is literally this activity that we engage in all the time, most of the time subconsciously, without realizing, is literally the thread that links birth and death. We cannot be in this world and we cannot speak without having breath. So there's an example made by turning a letter back to front. Now let's look at an example of a connection made by continuing a letter, extending it. C becomes E. They're very similar. If the whole becomes very small here, E almost looks like C. And I give the example of cross. There's no need to rearrange the letters here. The connection is a very simple one. Cross and eros. Now, why would I give the connection between cross, the cross on which Christ was crucified, and eros? Well, I think there are two reasons. The first is that God is love, and he was crucified for our sakes, something that he accepted out of love for us, to give us a way to him, to come to him. So I see a very strong connection between cross and eros, but there's also the physical fact that on the cross you are completely open, completely vulnerable, naked, your arms outstretched. It would be impossible to give more of yourself than in this position where your feet and hands are nailed to the wood. You are completely open, as we are in the erotic act. And in fact, there is a very strong connection between eros and open, using the order of letters in the alphabet. You will see that the vowels are the same, and you go N, O, P, Q, R, S, N, P, R, S, omitting the vowel O and the redundant letter Q. Eros involves being open. You cannot engage in the act of making love without being open. And I think on the cross, God was open for our sakes. He couldn't give more of himself. Eternal is a very beautiful connection. It actually involves two pairs of letters that look alike. I give F, T, which is when you turn the F upside down and get the letter T. But I also need to use I, L, and the phonetic pair M, N. You remember we talked about phonetics in a previous video. If I make these three changes using two physical pairs, F, T, one letter turned upside down, I, L, one letter continued, and the phonetic pair M, N, I get really a very beautiful connection. You see how the letter L in eternal is just like I. I am, I've turned the N into M, I am, and then what word have you got? If I turn the T upside down and get F, I am free. I think when we reach eternity, when the breath leaves our mouth, then we are free of the suffering of this world, free of the passions, free of temptation. There are many people who try to tell us what freedom is. Sometimes freedom seems to be the freedom to buy whatever you want, or say whatever you want, or do whatever you want, disregarding sometimes other people's well-being. I don't think that is freedom. I don't think going to the urns and voting in an election every 4 years is freedom either. I think paradoxically freedom is submission of our will to God's will. This is real freedom, because then we rediscover ourselves, what I talked about earlier, the connection between miracle and reclaim. We reclaim ourselves, and as I said before, free is connected to ever. Once you're free, it lasts forever. And I think we can see this here. Eternal has the spiritual meaning, I am free. Now, I am is the name of God in Exodus 3:14, my favorite verse in the Old Testament. Moses at the burning bush has been sent by God to free the Israelites from bondage in Egypt. And Moses says, well, who am I to say has sent me? On whose authority am I to do this? Because freeing the Israelites from bondage is quite a daunting task when you have people over you. And God says, I am who I am. So I am is the name of God in Exodus 3:14. And it's really the closest thing we can come to an identity, isn't it, in this life? We say I am, and then we define ourselves, or we say how we are feeling, or what we're doing at the moment. It's really as close as you can get to the essence of an individual. Here I understand it to be the name of God in Exodus 3:14. Now, there are two very beautiful and extremely important connections with I am. The first is law. I take the I, turn it into L, and I take the M and turn it upside down. I am gives law. Now, I think this relates to the law of the Old Testament. The law that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. He's here in fulfillment of the Old Testament law, in fulfillment of the Old Testament prophets who have prophesied about his coming. So, the name of God, I am, is closely connected to the Old Testament law. But there is another connection. If I take I am and again turn the M upside down and read the words in reverse, I get way. Way. I and Y are almost the same letter. Y is the semivowel that corresponds to I. So way. I am way. And this, rather than the Old Testament, refers, I think, to the New Testament and the coming of Christ, who says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the Word, and we are spoken into eternity. So I believe this to be true. He is the translator who will translate us into eternity. And we see this connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament, between Christ and the prophets, very clearly in these connections here. I am, the name of God in Exodus 3:14, law, the Old Testament law and prophets, and Christ himself, who is the way. Way contains I am in reverse. And in case you're thinking that this is just a coincidence, which of course it is, I will give another connection here which confirms this, and that is, if we read the I of I am as an L, which is what it looks like, and just add a B, a silent B at the end, we get lamb. Lamb. Now, who is the Lamb of God, if not Christ? This is how John the Baptist refers to him at the beginning of John's Gospel. So again, we have confirmation that Christ is the Son of God, who has come in fulfillment of the Old Testament law and prophets. And this can be found in two of the words used to refer to him. Way, when he says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and lamb, I am lamb, which is the term used by John the Baptist to refer to Christ, who is a sacrificial lamb on the cross, to atone for our sins. Mental. Again, I want to use this connection between I and L, remembering that a capital I and a lowercase L look almost the same. But I will also take one step in the alphabet from T to S. So I will use the alphabetical pair that we looked at in the previous video, S-T. I wonder if you can see the connection. Mental. Now, here you've again got I'm, the contraction. I'm. I've gone from T to S in the alphabet. I'm sane. I'm sane. Well, isn't that the opposite of what we take mental to mean? I'm actually sane. Well, I think this world can be a little cruel if you don't accept its rules. And if you think that what most people consider to be normal, the economy, buying and selling, making out that we own things, that they're ours to do with as we please, to make a profit out of our neighbour, rather than just to allow the flow of products so that people have what they need. No, we put borders, we put lines, we put laws, walls. These two words are connected, law, wall, so that people can only get what they need by paying for it. This is considered normal. Well, I don't think it is particularly normal, especially when the environment, as well as other people, suffer as a result of these lines being drawn, and only people who have enough money can afford to buy what they need, and perhaps others can't. So I think when perhaps people are considered to be mental, a little crazy. That's how we use the word. Maybe they're not. Maybe they just have a different vision that needs to be heard and understood. And maybe they are seeing things in the world that are in fact not right. And I would sympathize with that. And I think we can see this very clearly if we look at the word normal, which in a way is the opposite of mental. If you're normal, you're not mental. Right? Well, have a look at the word normal and see what you can find in reverse. I am wrong. There's a W and a G at the beginning and the end, but the three letters in the middle are R-O-N. Normal in reverse reads, I am wrong. So perhaps what we consider to be normal, making a profit at the expense of others, is not normal. And perhaps people we dismiss as mental are actually quite sane and are only suffering in this way because they have a different view, a different opinion. Maybe they see through these fallacies to how the world should be, and they suffer as a consequence. And I think people like that can be very compassionate, very understanding, very loving. So we need to consider that when we accept things the way they are, even though there are clear signs that all is not well with the environment, with hunger, famine, with war. I think all these things come as a direct result of us claiming to be authors, so that things begin with us and we can say that they are ours, when in fact they were here before we were born, and we are translators. Things pass through us, or we pass through them. Now, very often in language you find connections between seeming opposites, and north is an example of that. If I turn the N of north upside down and I take a step in the alphabet, R, S, you will find that north gives south. So opposites are not actually so far apart. North, south. We like to put things at opposite ends of the spectrum to divide so that we can share out. But actually, everything is connected. We are one body. And I think you see this in the way that opposites are very often connected. North, south is a very good example. R, S is a step in the alphabet. N, U is a physical pair where I've turned the letter upside down according to its appearance. Let us look at the other points of the compass, because they also are very interesting. East and west. Again, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. They seem to be polar opposites, but they're not. East and west. Is it not curious that three of the letters in these two words are exactly the same? E, S, T. E, S, T. And what are the two letters left behind? A, W, which is the Greek letter for omega. Alpha and Omega, the name of God. He is everywhere. He is also nowhere, which means now, here. I can give other examples of opposites that are connected. Let me write a few of them down, just so you can see how very often opposites are not so far apart as we think they are. And perhaps we're not so very different one from another. Our needs are the same. Love and a bit of food. Top and bottom. Crown, the crown of a tree, and ground. Roof of a house and floor. These are all clearly connected. Top, bottom. The first three letters of bottom, B-O-T in reverse, give top. Remember the phonetic pair? B-P. Crown, that's a K, a K at the beginning. K. Remember the phonetic pair? G-K. And the U here is its semivowel equivalent, W, with the addition of final D. We'll be looking at the addition of letters in the next video, one of my favorite areas of word connections, and the richest of them all. Roof and floor, the exact same letters with the addition of the letter L. So opposites, I've given 5 examples here, and I could give more, are clearly connected. We are not separate. We are one body. I'd like to finish with 2 of my favorite word connections using the physical pair V, Y. Y is just a continuation of V. It's just got a tail, that's all. Now, if you replace the V in devil with Y, you get yield. Yield. And I think this is what the devil wants from us, for us to yield, to give way to temptation. If we don't yield, we stay. Stay is what the devil doesn't want us to do. He wants us to run away, to flee. If we stay because we have faith in our hearts, stay in reverse gives yeast. And our bread ferments. We bear fruit, which you can only do as a tree does by staying in one place. This is why the devil tries to make us run away, because if we flit from one place to another, we will be unable to bear fruit. For fruit, you need root. Fruit, root. Devil, yield. So beware, because this is what he wants. Us to yield, to give way, to run away. Don't. Have faith. And the last example is venom, poison, the snake, the devil. Read that word in reverse and change the V into Y and tell me what you get. Venom, money. And isn't money the root of all evil, what causes so much dissension, so much hatred, so much war? Isn't it money that does that? Isn't money the venom in human and environmental situations? Well, there is the word to tell us this, because venom in reverse is money. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, which I mentioned earlier, Christ also says, no one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. The word often used is mammon, money. You cannot serve God and wealth. You must either look after your neighbour's needs or your own, at the expense of your neighbour. And I think that is a lot of what is going on in the world today. People with selfish or altruistic interests. You cannot serve God and wealth. So you have to choose. Are you going to follow the I, or are you going to make the progression to O? Are you going to do evil, or are you going to give love? Are you going to sin, or are you going to become a son of God? In those connections, I'm making the progression from I to O. Live in reverse. Evil, I to O, gives love. Sin, I to O, gives son. Well, if you take the word money and you take steps in the alphabet, N, M, L, L, M, N, and make the Y a V again, you've got love. Money, love. You must choose between them, or use the money that you have to do good. Do you see how the two words are connected? Two steps in the alphabet, as we made with Jerusalem, Jesus, Amen, in the previous video. L, M, N, and we used the physical pair VY, VY. Love. So we've seen again how word connections can tell us so much about human life, the world we live in, what is right about it and what is not so good, and how we can change, how we can repent, how we can open our eyes, our spiritual eyes, and see. And this is what I'm trying to do with these word connections, to show you the spiritual meaning inside words that want to show us their meaning. If only we have eyes to see. In the next video, we will look at the last way of making word connections, which is using the rules we've already applied of phonetics, the alphabet, and the letter's appearance, but adding letters.